If you haven't heard yet, I just launched Future of Work Leaders, a global community of the world's top people leaders shaping the future of work and employee experience. If you are interested in learning more and requesting an invite, and if you are a chief human or chief people officer, then head on over to futureofworkleaders.com. Again, that is futureofworkleaders.com. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Future Ready Leadership. I have two guests today, and they are the co-CEOs of Gensler. I have Jordan Goldstein and Elizabeth Brink. Thank you both for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure to be here, Jacob.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to speaking with both of you. The issue of space and work is a huge one. But I thought before we jump into that, we can start with a little bit of background information just about the company, in case people are not familiar with Gensler. And as I was saying before I hit record, we're hosting our annual Chief Human Resource Officer forum at the end of January in Dallas, and it's going to be at the new Neiman Marcus Hub, which was, as I understand, designed and envisioned by Gensler. So for people not familiar with you guys, what do you do?
Sure. Well, first of all, excited to be here and talk a little bit more about our firm and just the creative powerhouse that we are globally. You know, we're the world's most impactful and innovative design firm. So we were started about 60 years ago, and we really lead through a collaborative model, which we're excited to talk about today. And the beauty of what works for us is the ability to really network and connect the leaders and the talent that we have across 57 locations globally. And it really kind of fosters a approach towards design and creativity and innovation that really allows us to nurture those human connections and drive positive change in the world. So, you know, our approach to design is really, operating, through the approach of how do we enhance the human experience? How do we connect with our clients, and how do we really shape the world through the power of design?
Yeah. And how many employees do you guys have?
So we are at 6,100 employees.
Wow. I think last time I had Diane, the former CEO, you were much less. I want to say it was near 4 or 5. Is that right? Like 3-4 years ago?
That sounds about right. Yeah, it's been amazing opportunities for growth for us. And it's also been really organic growth, being able to find new talent that helps us grow in the practices that we're in around the globe.
Why don't we talk a little bit about your respective journeys into getting into your role? I can't remember. I think this is probably the first time I've had two co-CEOs as guests on the podcast. I think it's a very interesting leadership model. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you each got into your respective roles, and how is that co-CEO structure? How does that work? And is it something that other organizations can do, maybe even not on the CEO level, but like co-team leaders? Like, what are the pros and cons of all that stuff?
Yeah, I think, I'm so glad you asked about the co-leadership model, and it really builds on so much of what Jordan was talking about with what is core to our firm, what is core in terms of being a creative firm, being a collaborative firm. So this co-leadership model goes all through the organization. Jordan and I are co-CEOs now, but we've both been co-leaders with other people throughout our journey. And that model of always wanting to have partners that you bounce ideas off of, that challenge you, that you challenge, it again is really part of being a creative organization. We do that on our projects, we do that on our teams, we do that in our leadership model. So it's almost a natural way of being for all of us in the organization. We know in the business world it's really highly unusual to have that, but effectively we thrive on that. We thrive on having these partners at all different levels who we can, in a really trusted way, question, and who could question us. And it elevates all of our thinking and pushes us even further. So, all of our partners operate in a collaborative way across the firm. All of our practices operate in a collaborative way. There are co-leaders for all of our vertical practices. All of our design leaders operate in a co-way.
Interesting.
So we again we're really used to that kind of model, and it's really beneficial to us.
Yeah. How does that work? Maybe you can unpack the logistics of that, because I think a lot of people who have full-time jobs, who are not entrepreneurs doing their own thing like me, are very much used to the idea of I have one leader, I have one CEO, I have one person that I'm reporting to. And similarly, leaders are used to being that one person where the buck stops with them, they make the decisions. So how does that co-leader model work? Does that mean there always needs to be consensus? There always needs to be agreement? Does it take longer time to make decisions? Like what was the idea and kind of the logistics
Well,
behind how that works?
the beauty of it is, Elizabeth's been with the company 20 years. I've been here 28 years. I actually started right out of grad school. So both of us on our journey here have had opportunities to act in that co-model.
Mm-hmm.
And as Elizabeth was saying, it actually really runs through the organization. So, I had a chance to co-lead an office, co-lead a region of the firm. And in that capacity, really learning about how do you quickly, when you step into the role, sit with your partner and map out the aces and spaces that you each have. And it's, what's the beauty of that is, like when Elizabeth and I did it shortly after, we stepped into the CEO role, it was thinking about, okay, well, here's the things that I feel like I'm passionate about, I may be good at. Here's some things that, may not so good at. And Elizabeth doing the same. And then you really start to step back and look at it holistically and say, all right, well, here's really the 1 + 1 = 3 approach to this, and for us, that actually has worked out so well. The other piece of this, which is nice, is as a design firm, it allows us at these different, whether we were leading an office, leading a region, now leading the firm, we can still keep a foot in the work.
Yeah.
So both of us are still connected in with clients. We're still engaged in some of the project opportunities that we have globally. And I think that there's a relevancy to that. It's keeping us connected in to what we do every day. And then I think it also creates an earned trust scenario with those that we work with every day and also those that we're meeting with, across the table in a client scenario.
When you asked about, too, the agility of decision making, I thought that was a really interesting part of the question because we're such a mission-driven organization. We're all very much aligned around, creating a better world through the power of design, positively enriching the human experience, and our purpose of having an impact through the work that we're doing. So those core values, that core purpose is so aligned across the organization. And knowing that, you have a whole lot of leaders who can move things forward even more quickly because it's not alignment around a specific action, it's alignment around values, and the values allow us to act at multiple levels of the organization in multiple locations, but still be moving this firm forward towards the goals. So it's a very different way of thinking about it, but what it stems from is that alignment around core purpose, core values, core mission, that goes really deep in the organization.
So, but how does it
Jacob,
actually? Yeah, so I'm just really curious how it actually works. Like, does every team have 2 leaders behind it, and then how does the kind of the logistics of it work? Right, setting the strategy, doing reviews, setting priorities. Do the co-leaders get together frequently, like once a month, once a week? Like, walk me through the process of how the co-leaders work together, and if it's standard kind of across the entire the company.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, both of us probably can weigh in on that because we see it, and have seen it through our journeys, at Gensler. For us, from a co-CEO scenario, one of the things that we find just, I think, both a joy of what we do, but also something that is, creates every day being different, is we talk every day. We are talking by text. We are talking, on a Zoom call. We are a lot of times traveling together as well. But again, it gets back to, the 1 + 1 = 3 that I mentioned earlier, is that when we are engaged in conversations with teams, to recognize that there's certain aspects of our business that, we can be of one voice on, but there's other things that absolutely Elizabeth could really take first position on, or I could step in and take first position on. And we do that with a ton of respect. Inevitably, if there are things that really want to have, deep discussion, maybe differences of thought, then we do that behind closed doors. And then when we go out, that one voice mentality echoes through the firm. But both of us had that opportunity to get those experiences early on, whether it was leading a region or in other capacities. You asked a question about, is it really go all the way through? It goes through a lot of our firm, but at the same time, we see that our projects that we're doing every day around the world, those are really, they're team-based projects, but most cases you have, a singular team leader, a singular
Okay.
voice that's acting as the conductor of that symphony.
Got it.
Yeah, and I would say there's a lot of, since we are on video, you can see my hands, there's a lot of the leaders coming together, making decisions, and then going out and sort of enacting and driving this down through whether it's the organization, the region, the practice, even the team. They'll come together, they'll understand the strategy, they'll go back out and make sure they're getting all the input from other leaders. Again, we're a partnership organization, so we have 380 partners across the firm, and we need to make sure that we're constantly bringing them on board to the decision making as well. So we're going in this direction. Let's communicate. Let's get feedback. Let's come back and adjust. Let's communicate. Let's get feedback. And so we're making decisions and moving forward at the same time.
Okay.
A lot of times. To get into some of the brass tacks. I come from a change management background. So I really have that perspective. And Jordan as well is so great at communicating with teams and has driven some really large design project teams forward. And so you're constantly having to be adjusting. It actually allows us to be really agile because we don't create a strategy and then never get feedback as we're moving it forward. We're constantly getting feedback and able to incorporate that agility into the decision making. It's sort of the natural instinct of having that design background.
Let's shift gears a tiny bit here and talk about some of the things that are happening in the world of work around space. As a leading design firm when it comes to space, I'm sure you've been following the news. There's a lot of debate around space and do we need it? AT&T, companies like Amazon are mandating employees to come back to the office. Some companies are saying, no, work wherever you want. So first question for you, is there still a need for space? Do we still need corporate offices, headquarters where employees show up? And then as a follow-up question to that, how are companies thinking about space if we still need it? Are we changing what the space is used for? Are we changing how we're designing spaces? Like what's happening just in that world of corporate offices?
Sure. Yeah. We believe there's definitely a need for space,
Yeah.
but it's also with the recognition that the workplace is no longer just a place to work. It's a space to build culture, to support employees, to communicate brand and mission, to be a convener and bring people together. Our research, and we haven't had a chance to talk about it, but we have a Gensler Research Institute, and we've done a lot of research on the workplace and really what are employees looking for, what are employers looking for, and how do you coalesce that, in physical architecture. And certainly making the office a destination, not an obligation, so people want to be there, is really important. In our design forecast that we just published, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. But one of the things we talk about is the importance of in the workplace that spaces that are prioritizing employee experience and aligning with new tenant expectations around sustainability, around amenities, around agility in the workplace, spaces that can be constantly changed and not fixed for a singular use. These are some of the things that really give validity to the workplace of today.
Okay. So, sorry, Elizabeth, sounds like you were going to say something.
I was just going to reiterate that really the question that we're seeing is not whether space is important, but how to be using it,
Yeah.
really to enhance the experience and engagement of people in the workplace. And that is it's going to look slightly different for each company because it has to be tied to what the goals, culture, expectations of that organization are. And so it's very focused on what their people need, the type of work that they do. But yes, it absolutely is mattering, even more so for younger generations. We see a lot of our research is finding what's really coming out is the epidemic of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
The sense that we've become so disconnected, and the workplace is somewhere that we can really come together. It's where people make really important relationships, sometimes with people they wouldn't otherwise meet in their lives. And the more that a workplace can foster that sense of belonging and coming together, it's not only great for the organization, it's great for the individuals too. So we're seeing more and more that that's a part of the future workplace.
Okay, so space still important, still relevant. What are you seeing from some of your clients and customers? I mean, you see these return to office mandates. We didn't talk about what approach you have at Gensler. Do you have return to office mandates? Are you seeing that a lot of your customers are using their spaces for full-time work, to have hybrid work? Like what's the big trend that you're seeing from a lot of the companies you work with?
We are back in the office, and we mentioned, we're a collaborative culture. We benefit from being around each other, sharing ideas, putting things up on a wall, putting things up on a screen, cross communicating with other offices, other teams around the world. So we're 5 days a week,
Yeah.
in the office across the globe. In terms of what we're seeing with our clients, we definitely have seen them start to utilize the spaces and places that they're in as conveners, as opportunities to bring people together, whether that's for, the everyday moving ideas forward or pushing innovation through the company, but also the opportunities for training, for coaching, for mentoring, for team building. And something I think is really interesting is we've seen a lot of companies start to really think about, how do you bring people together in a way that you are communicating, and helping, kind of propagate mission and brand through a company. So spaces that can flex up, so you can actually have large gatherings, and spaces that can then flex down when it's not as many people coming together and be utilized in different ways. And it's not all about hard construction, having to move walls, physically to be able to make that happen.
Yeah. So when you went back to the office 5 days a week, did you get a lot of pushback from your employees? Because I'm assuming during pandemic, like most companies, you were fully remote or virtual or very much hybrid. What was your, when you told everybody you're coming back to the office, what was that like? How did you convey that? What was the messaging? Did you deal with any pushback, or was it kind of a seamless, smooth return?
Yeah, I think again, it goes to who we are as an organization, being such a deeply collaborative organization, that people really wanted to be coming together and saw the importance of that for our learning organization, for teaching, particularly some of our younger people. We had a tremendous number of people that got hired into the organization during the pandemic. And so having people together in the office, in fact, those new hires were the people that wanted to be in the office as much as possible. They wanted to really be embedded into the culture that is Gensler. That's why they come to this firm, in order to learn, to be mentored, to be a part of the culture. And so they were really driving so much of that, and the
Yeah.
need to get them integrated and to continue building that culture of learning was really a tremendous part of why we pushed so hard to do that. And also another aspect of it that we were really focused on and really committed to was that so many of our offices are in the heart of our cities, in the heart of our downtowns, and bringing people into the office has a multiplier effect on the health of those cities and the economic vibrancy of those cities. And we're really committed to that and being an active, proactive part of the communities that we're in. And we saw how important that would be to get people back into those central business districts, being a part of that vibrant fabric of the downtown areas. And so I think a lot of our team members and our colleagues also understood that and are so committed to that. Both sides of it, the learning culture, the creative culture, and being a proactive part of our communities, that, there were a lot of champions
Yeah.
for pushing this forward and wanting to be back in the office.
Yeah, and I would say, Jacob, there's some really great examples of projects that are coming online now that are exemplifying a lot of the things that we're talking about. I'll give you an example. Opening in January is the Under Armour headquarters
Okay.
that we just completed, and they're a performance apparel company, and here's a building that will be coming online that is a performance building. It is a true sustainable story. It is a net zero operation building, and it's one of those buildings that for us represents everything we're talking about. Like, you walk into this building, you actually feel like you're walking into a stadium. Doesn't look like any kind of office that you've seen. What they do every day is on display. There's actually a flagship retail store that's a part of the headquarters. So those that are in there working on the next generation of product are able to see the product right there and see customers coming in and out. So they're interacting with who they're designing for. At the same time, they're dealing with athletes, and there's actually a football field and a basketball court and a track and a stadium right adjacent as part of the headquarters campus. So athletes like a Steph Curry or a football team like the University of Maryland or Notre Dame can actually come there, can actually work out there, and Under Armour is also working with them to tweak product, right there in real time. And you walk into this building and you see it's not a concrete or steel building. It's a mass timber. It's a wood building. So it's sustainable that you're seeing right away. There's 3,000 plus photovoltaic solar panels on the building. So again, you're seeing the betterment that this building is creating in the environment. So from a return to work standpoint, here's a company and a building that is really taking a step forward and thinking through, what's that recipe that will draw people to that destination.
Yeah.
I still want my invitation.
Yeah, I was going to say, I want to go check that place out.
To go do a workout there.
Come on down and join us.
It reminds me, when I wrote a book in 2017 on employee experience, I talked about space. And one of the things, I think it was Edgar Schein from MIT, he did research and found that the physical space kind of acts as a symbol of what your company represents.
Yes.
And so it seems to me that more and more organizations are realizing that, and they're using their space as kind of a symbol that represents our values, our culture, what we stand for. But then you also see some companies that are saying, well, we're getting rid of our offices and we're just going to be hybrid forever. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on, I'm a big believer in working in the office. I mean, I'm okay with flexible work. I think there's some value to that as well. But I'm not a huge fan of just 100% full-time remote. I think there's a lot of value in the office for leadership development, for training, for collaboration, for communication. I always give people the example of, if I'm giving a speech somewhere, there's a difference between me giving a speech staring into a camera versus being on a stage. I can do more of them at home staring into a camera, but they're going to be more impactful when I'm on a stage and people can see me and I can see them and you can see the full body, not just a floating head. It makes a difference. And so to the organizations out there that are, I don't know, they're considering getting rid of space or not utilizing space or not having employees back in the office, do you think that they're making a mistake or they're losing out in some areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for all the reasons you just said, for all the reasons, we talk about, space is a really important tool that can be leveraged to drive engagement, to, again, drive connection to brand and culture, to enable people to learn in different ways. I think it's an incredible learning tool as well. And particularly as so many organizations are grappling with, technology. Listen, we can do all of this on the screen. We have, technology tools are evolving really quickly, and I'm sure we'll get into that as well. But, focusing on the humanity of the people that are doing their work, that is an equally important part. And humanity is really when we are face to face with one another. How that looks for each organization, again, it may depend a little bit varied on how that looks and how they use the space and what they use the space for. But the bringing of people together is incredibly important. And we see, we're talking about workplace, but we also see that coming out of the pandemic, what people wanted to do was gather together. They wanted to have those shared experiences. It pulled people out of their homes. And one of the trends that we're really seeing in our design forecast, which we'll also probably get to, our 2025 design forecast, is the importance of these sort of mixed use urban environments that are really experientially focused. And I say that in a question about work because work is also an experientially driven. At its best, it's about the experience of the employees and what that brings out of them and how that enables them to do their work. So I think that human side of us is a really important part of all of our experience, and all the spaces and places that we design should be enhancing that, whether it's a workplace, whether it's a downtown urban environment, whether it's a performance space, whether it's a sports stadium. All of that is really wrapped up into that same experience.
We really can't underestimate the power of place.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, Jacob, there is the power of being able to bring people together, to connect the dots, to find those connections and opportunities to take dialogue to the next level. And the office as a stage for that can't be underestimated.
I completely agree. I see a lot of use and value in space. Well, we talked a little bit about this trends report, so I thought maybe we could dive into that. You had 5 trends for 2025. But maybe as we go through each one, we could talk about how those are relevant to leaders of organizations, how they might be relevant for employees, because they're design trends, but I'm also really interested how those design trends are going to impact how work actually gets done. So maybe we could start off with the first one that you had on the list, which I believe was mixed use lifestyle, if I'm using that correctly.
I can dive into that first one. So it's that notion of experience-driven lifestyle districts and a heavy emphasis on experience. And this is reimagining cities with vibrant mixed-use destinations and a mix of programs that connect people through a whole range of experiences. And I'll give you for example on that one. Mm-hmm. So in Nashville, there's a project called 5th and Broadway that we did, and we share this in the design forecast. And this project is a big project. It is a mixed-use development that plugs right into the center of the city. And for those that aren't familiar with Nashville, you have this amazing street that has all the bars and restaurants on it, music, out the window at 10 in the morning. And then further up that street is an arena. And there was a part of that was disconnected. So this kind of stitches that fabric together. And it's a series of kind of architectural and urban moves that create great pedestrian pathways, mixes of uses, restaurants, retail, hospitality, office, residential, all kind of coming together in multi-levels. So it's not just kind of the horizontal connectivity, it's also the vertical connectivity. And what's amazing is that you look at it now, and it's now super successful day and night, whether there's an event going on in the arena or not. And it's pulling offices to be there. So Alliance Bernstein, for example, has a large workplace, right in this complex that is adjacent to all those different uses. So whether that's the restaurants, the live music venue that's a part of it, or the hospitality where people are coming in and visiting the organization or that are coming in for training, let's say, or meetings, it's all happening right there. And it plays up that notion that, we have talked about before in our research around this 20-minute city. That, within this radius, you can have this kind of live, work, play, and that term's been used a lot, but this is actually making it real. Mm-hmm. You can see, for instance, for Marriott International, moving there into the project we opened recently, where they moved their new headquarters into an urban environment. They're plugging right in, and they put an adjacent new hotel right next to it. And then they created a pedestrian plaza where people can gather, restaurants that are open to all. And they're plugging into the surrounding, retail and restaurants. For companies that are looking for that next generation level of energy, it also means that you can think differently about the amenities that you're bringing into your office space when you're plugging into an existing fabric of amenities that are immediately adjacent to it.
Are you a chief people officer or a chief human resource officer that is responsible for the future of work and employee experience? If so, then you're going to want to check out futureofworkleaders.com. It's a new global community that I am putting together of the world's top people leaders from brands including Neiman Marcus, Johnson & Johnson, Dow, Lego, Tractor Supply, Northrop Grumman, and dozens of others. If you're interested in learning more and requesting an invite, and again, if you are a chief human or chief people officer, then head on over to futureofworkleaders.com. So when you think about this from like a business or a work trend, what do you think this means for the future of work? Does this mean that organizations going forward, as they think about space, that companies are not just going to have offices that are isolated and separate? They're going to be kind of embedded more into kind of, I don't know, stitched into the quilt of whatever the city looks like instead of having standalone corporate offices off by themselves?
I think that is so tied into this whole idea of how are we creating experiences that compel people to do the commute, to move, go from their home and come into the office. And yes, it's a part of being part of the urban fabric. When people go into work, they want to connect with their, the people they're working with. They also want to connect to the communities that they're in and be able to do more than just the one thing. So yes, absolutely. Being a part of that stitched in quilt is a key part of work. And it's what, again, makes that vibrant city. It's going to drive more retail, better retail. It's going to drive more interesting restaurants in the area. It's also going to drive, more interesting immersive experiences when people are working and they want to come out and do something fun with their colleagues or
Yeah.
meet their families after work. All of that is what really is the richness of the urban environment, the 20-minute city that we were just talking about. All of it really connects together. And these are the neighborhoods where there is where vacancy is low in office buildings, where those top buildings are really in very high demand in areas like this. So it's really playing out.
Yeah, it's interesting in some cities. I think in San Francisco, right, the vacancy is still very, very high. And I think, I can't remember, is New York one of them too? But there are a couple cities. I know San Francisco is one of them where the vacancy rate is just incredibly high for businesses. So I'm wondering, does this trend play with that vacancy rate? Like, do you see those vacancy rates declining? Are we still going to have like these major cities like San Francisco and New York that will continue to be hubs? Are suburbs going to grow with these types of mixed use spaces? Like, what does this mean for how we think about, I guess, attracting and retaining talent, right? Because I think there's a lot of implications for where the spaces are versus where we look for employees versus where they come into the office. So how does all this play together, and what are you seeing as far as vacancy, mixed use, major cities versus suburbs?
Yeah, New York is an incredible example, and I'll let you go, Jordan, but because it is vacancy is low there, relatively speaking, and it is a thriving mixed use urban environment at a macro scale.
Yeah.
So it's a great example of having incredible experiences, incredible food, incredible hospitality experiences, great workplaces that are, compelling people to come in so that they can have those experiences. I think it's the holiday season. If you go to New York right now, it is bustling.
Yeah,
We're
it's pretty
talking to
crazy.
people. And what we're seeing is that in those cities that have been able to do exactly this, to create these mixed use, environments, whether they're smaller cities, whether they're major cities, they really are creating that vibrancy that is driving people into the spaces. So there'll be some transformation and there's some adjustment going on. We really see it's also the workplaces that have been renovated more recently that are really taking advantage of a lot of these trends that are creating the spaces people want to be in, the collaborative spaces, the mix of spaces, the variety of spaces, the tie to the outdoors, the sustainability, all of that is also a part of the mix too.
Okay. And number 2 we had on this list, we touched on a little bit with Under Armour, sustainable design. So it seems like more organizations are going towards that direction, using wood, solar panels, greenery, right? Buildings that don't look so much like buildings, but they almost look more like, I don't know, not museums, but like cool places you actually want to step your foot inside because you just look at it and you're like, that's pretty awesome. As opposed to,
I love that.
the traditional
Cool
kind of
places.
just skyscraper where you look at it and you're like, nah, I've seen that before.
Yeah, the sustainability, design push is something that we feel in 2025 is going to take off at another level in a couple of ways. So we feel like it'll be a driving force in real estate with environmentally conscious buildings commanding top value.
Okay.
And then back to the conversation we were just having, also prompting that flight to quality. People when they're thinking about, we need to relocate, well, what's available? Well, these buildings are, actually making a stronger push, for a much more sustainable footprint. For instance, you mentioned San Francisco. We moved recently, just last year, we moved from a fossil fuel powered building to an electric powered building. So we moved our entire operations to this new setup because it was a much more sustainable story. And it allowed us to live our mission better in this new environment. But a couple other things just to point out, I think really 3 things. One is advancements in materials like zero carbon cement, low carbon interior finishes. Yeah, I mean, right, zero carbon cement. Who would have thought, right? Mass timber. I mentioned it earlier. So mass timber, most people don't know really exactly what that means, but you go to the hardware store and you see like 2x4s. But when you actually push this together and you make beams and and floor slabs out of laminated wood beams and pieces, it actually has a tremendous strength and also is inherently fire resistant if it's done right. So you get this great sustainable building, product. The other piece of this, so that's number 1 is really a materials revolution.
And
Number
before
2,
you jump to the next one, it's also,
sure.
I think you get a different feel when you're surrounded by natural materials like
Oh, for sure.
wood,
Yeah.
greenery, plants, right? I mean, I know when I go into those types of spaces or if I go into a coffee shop and it's got kind of that vibe of, nice wood tables, there's greenery in there. You're kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like walking
It
in nature and in the
feels good,
forest.
right? You want to hang out
Yeah,
there,
it feels
So
different.
it's whether it's our, like we've done this, like I said, on Under Armour, or you go into NVIDIA and you feel like this, the new project that we've done there, where it's a biophilia kind of environment. There's greenery, there's natural light. Even in retail, we look at the Starbucks, work that we've done, and you go into like a roastery and you feel like, it's warm, it's inviting. But it's so that's a larger kind of, how does it make you feel? Emotive and physical reaction, I think, in a positive direction. The other piece of this is how do you start to change the game with regards to the materials and finishes that designers and architects are using every day around the world? And honestly, we felt like there wasn't action happening fast enough. So we felt like we had to kind of do a shot across the bow. So we actually put out this past year, we're excited about it in 2025. We call it, it's Gensler's product sustainability standards. So it's basically minimum threshold for products to be considered for projects. So when you're looking at this carpet or this wallpaper or this wood for the surface, it has to meet that minimum threshold of sustainability to be considered. So with that San Francisco office I mentioned, when we moved to that space, all products that were going to be in that library that we were using every day had to pass that minimum threshold. So our hope is it creates a ripple effect throughout the industry. And it causes manufacturers, other design firms, vendors, fabricators to think differently about what they're doing and how they're making finishes and materials for everyday projects. Many of them are, but we're really trying to raise the game. And then the last piece of this that I would just touch on, and we can talk about it because it relates to the next trend that we highlighted, is reuse strategies. So converting, you talked about in cities that have vacancies. Well, some of those buildings are not going to continue the way they were, right? It's not going to be, just turn on the lights and people are going to want to move in there. So thinking about, adaptive reuse, and what a great sustainable story if you're able to bring, new life to old bones, and whether that's like office to residential, or is it, big box retail that becomes, a new sports and entertainment venue. A lot of these are entering into the dialogue in a way that says that downtowns, that mixed use equation we talked about, can really be enriched by adaptive reuse of some of the existing structures that are there.
Yeah, that reminds me a lot of. I feel like in the Bay Area when I used to live there, we used to see a lot of that, right? These just old warehouses, hangars by the wharf, by the pier. They were reused into these really cool spaces, and yeah, it's just really interesting to see. And it also has like its really cool vibe when you see that. Like keeping the old structure of a building, but maybe changing some of the inside or leaving the exposed beams. Like you could see the AC units, like the metal AC pieces in the ceiling. Like it's got, I don't
It's
know,
got a good vibe, right?
yeah. It's I don't know what the technical name for that. It was like an urban style construction. Is that
Let's
what it is?
call it urban cool. How's that?
Urban cool. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting to see that, and it's so different than like a very super hyper modern, which hyper modern also has its own kind of cool vibe. But I remember there was a study that was done a little while ago. It's kind of a tangential to this, but still related. There was a company, I think it was called the Leisman Index. Do you remember them? And this was many years ago. They did a study and they found that during the course of a typical day, an employee might do 21 different types of activities. And I remember reading that at the time when I was working on my employee experience book. And I was thinking, well, you don't have one room in your house. You have different rooms for different purposes. And so why shouldn't organizations have different styles and different approaches and different floor plans depending on how employees work? So I don't know, maybe you have some like open bullpen-like areas. Maybe you have some conference rooms. Maybe you have some open library, quiet type areas. Are you seeing organizations embracing that more heavily where they're creating multiple workspace options as opposed to, just like an open floor plan for everyone?
Absolutely. We've done a whole lot of our own research. The Gensler Research Institute has really been a pioneer in understanding, in particular, the workplace experience and understanding those different types of activities. So great to hear you talking about work is not just one thing, it's a multiple activities throughout the day, and understanding, again, what each employee's journey is, what different organizations need from those experiences from their employees. And that's absolutely a part of what we see for for the workplace of the future, that it will have a balance between open spaces and closed spaces, private spaces, shared spaces, light spaces, dark spaces,
Yep.
quiet spaces, buzzy spaces. This is, a lot of what we're talking about. You see that in the example that Jordan was talking about, our San Francisco office. You also see it in a great example of the type of conversion you were just talking about. The Google space at St. John's Terminal in New York that
Mm.
recently opened. It's a conversion of a 1930s freight terminal,
Wow.
right? So it has that conversion vibe going for it, and it has all kinds of different spaces. Again, it's really embraced a variety of spaces that teams can choose to use in different ways. It gives them that ownership of choosing how they use the spaces. And it also has an incredible, in addition to the adaptive reuse, it has an incredible sustainability story in that all of the landscaping is regenerative. So it's
Mm.
bringing different types of native plants, native species back to, the urban core of New York. So creating, again, different types of habitats and spaces where people can go work outside in those natural settings, which we know is so great for mental health and well-being. So it really brings together a lot of what we've been talking about, and it's one of those spaces that people just love to go into.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
love to come to work there.
yeah. It's not hard to understand why. Maybe we can get to one more trend before we wrap up, and that was kind of future of workplace employee experience. So the way that I've always talked about this in my previous books is that employee experience is a combination of three things, which is culture, technology, and space. So how you feel working for a company, the spaces in which you work, and the tools and resources you have access to do your job. And I always thought there's kind of like this big interplay between those things, right? Because the culture will shape the space. There's a lot of relationship between space and how you use technology in the space. So what is that trend for you when you talk about the future workplace and it being here, and a big part of that is employee experience? What are you seeing? What are your clients and customers talking about there?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of many of the elements that you just talked about, but in different recipes for different clients at different times, and different locations. It's also very interesting that, we work with, clients and they could have locations around the globe. And it's not a one size fits all where the office in New York is just like the office in London,
Yeah.
which is just like the office, in Singapore. So one of the things that we really love is that our teams are really dialing into what does it mean to be hyper local and understand the communities and the cities that those locations are in. And then with that, through the brand of that company, how do you really transpose that into, a workplace in a way that really says it is that company, but it's that company in that location.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really, really important, especially for these global brands, that they recognize that they are, global brands, but they're also in the communities, that they have these offices in around the world. On the technology piece, totally agree. I actually think, for Elizabeth and I, it's like super exciting to think about, how technology will play its way into the workplace. And one of the things that we are definitely experimenting with ourselves, on a number of project opportunities is what does it mean to have immersive technologies in the workplace environment?
Yeah.
And what does that mean, right? It's like, it means that the idea of, walking into a conference room and there's a 55-inch flat screen on the wall, that's the old world. What does it mean to actually have a space where you feel like you are engaged in, a meeting or an idea, but in an immersive environment in which other people are participating, potentially from other locations, and it feels very fluid. It feels like there is no second-class citizen in that session,
So
because everyone feels like their voice can matter and that they're seen and heard.
So what do you mean by that, as opposed to, because a lot of people are familiar with the big 50-inch TV flat screen. So when you say more immersive, what do you mean? Like what's different about the immersive versus the giant TV that everyone's used to?
Well, immersive is also a platform to recognize that it's not about a singular technology. It's about recognizing that, first of all, the kind of the tools in the toolbox are constantly going to change. So, being able to create an environment where, you can have immersive as in the physical, I'll call it physical becomes digital, right? Physical and digital come together so that the surfaces are all interactive surfaces. And recognizing that there is now, the spatial computing coming into this that allows people to, in a sense, be present in different ways or engage in different ways within the environment. So we are not only doing that ourselves with the technology in our own spaces, but we're also working with clients, both tech clients and even those in a bunch of other spheres, to experiment with it. And it gets to that notion, just one final thought on that, gets to that notion of living constantly in beta, right? That, it's not about saying it's fixed and this is the way it's going to be, but let's experiment, let's pilot, let's try this. And if it works, let's start to permeate a little bit more of the place, of the space, of the organization and see what happens.
Yeah, I like that approach very much. Well, we're near the end of our time. We wrapped up very quickly, actually. I think we went through pretty much most of the trends. We didn't touch on attainable housing that much, but we kind of alluded to it when we were talking about living in different areas. But Elizabeth, I guess I'll give you the last word. Is there anything else that you want to make sure that we wrap up with in the last 1 or 2 minutes when we think about space and work, or any of the trends that you want to expand on that we didn't get a chance to?
Thank you for asking, and I will touch just really briefly on the attainable housing because it's such an important issue for so many of our cities to be thinking creatively about problem solving in that way, and thinking it brings together again conversions, and it brings together this idea of we have to think a little bit differently about how we approach the problems. But mostly, given what we're talking about today, I think there's just so much opportunity. We talk about work, we talk about how people are coming together, we talk about the importance of space, really as a key tool for driving engagement, for bringing people together, and connecting one another. And we're really thrilled to be looking to the future. When we look to 2025, we see all of these trends really coming together. And there's going to be a lot of activity in moving it forward. It's been a lot of experimentation going on over the last few years, a lot of exploration in terms of what do our cities need to look like, what do our workplaces need to look like, and how do they need to function. And right now, it's really exciting to see all of it coming together, and really creating a new paradigm moving forward. So we're happy to be at this place where we really can say the future of the workplace is here, and we're moving it forward, and organizations have gone through the experimentation and they're ready to take on something new.
Yeah, lots of cool stuff happening in the world of work and when we think about space. Well, Jordan, Elizabeth, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. Where can people go to learn more about you? Anything that you want to mention for people to check out, your LinkedIn's, anything you want to plug?
Sure. Well, first of all, Jacob, thanks for having us. Awesome conversation. Definitely go to the Gensler.com website, and you'll be able to see the 2025 forecast. You'll be able to learn a little bit more about both of us. But Instagram, LinkedIn, we are there. We are on it. So feel free to connect with us that way.
Cool. Well, thank you so much both for your time. I really appreciate it. And thank you everyone for tuning in. I'll see all of you next week. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Future Ready Leadership. If you want to get access to more content on how you can become future ready, make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. It's thefutureorganization.com/newsletter. And if you enjoyed this episode, please send it to somebody who you would like to see become a better leader. Thanks for listening or watching, and I will see you next time.